So I just want to thank you, for joining my roster of reporters and journalists to share the love and knowledge. And Dawn, can you just share, first of all, like who you are, where you are, who you work for, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Donna Araujo-Hawkins. I am the news editor at the Christian Century, which is a bi-weekly magazine for like progressive mainline Christians, so Episcopalians, Presbyterians, United Methodists, those types, not exclusively, I guess.
Yeah. So quick question before, because I'm a chronic interrupter, which I shouldn't
Fine.
be because you're supposed to listen, but so what exactly, for all the TV people, because we do have a lot of TV people in our group right now, which I hope it will expand in the future. What is exactly an editor? What does your job entail?
Well, at the Christian Century, we're a pretty small staff.
Yeah.
There are well now four. There are four kind of main editors at the magazine, and they really craft the feature well and the what we call upfront, so like shorter features that are at the beginning of the magazine. I do that sometimes. Really, my baby is the 6-page news section, which I am the entire staff. Like I
Wow.
come up with the articles. Sometimes I will reach out to a freelancer and say, hey, could you write this for me? Sometimes if someone wants to write for the news section, I'm the one who okays that. I edit all the stories. I find all the photos. I occasionally write the stories if I can't find what I'm looking for. So really my job is making every 2 weeks a 6-page news section that goes into the magazine. If you want to know, that's what the other editors do. I guess they do the same thing, but on a slightly different scale. They're not really working with news stories so much, but they're the ones who work with editors to go through drafts of stories. But the Christian Century, I think, is unusually collaborative. So in a sense, when I say I just do the news section and sometimes I help out with, other articles, everyone really reads everything at our magazine. Like an article will come in or a pitch will come in. We will all talk about it in our little group chat. And then like the one editor who's like spearheading that particular project will go back with all of our comments. So we're a very collaborative bunch. It's
Yeah.
not nearly as categorized as I make it sound.
I always say to like print journalists, you have to be really thorough. Not that TV isn't, but we fill such a small space that literally when you write down our scripts, it's like 4 lines, 4 or 5 lines. It's pretty crazy. The amount of information we have to not include just to make time slot. So I always say, like, you guys have to do such a thorough job, and the questions you answer are so much better just because you do have to get every detail, I feel like. Is that hard for you? Is it second nature now?
It feels pretty second nature to me at this point because I've only ever been in print, and on top of that, I've only ever really worked in long form. So a story I wrote today was just published at 3,800 words, which seems like outrageously long to some people.
Yeah.
I guess there's longer. And I had to cut stuff out to get it to 3,800. Like there was way more that I wanted to include in this story. Some really just riveting details, but I didn't have room.
Yeah. So go on and tell us more about yourself, I guess, because I cut you off right away.
No worries. So yeah, at the Christian Center, I've been here for about a year and a half. And when I say here, I have worked remotely really since I've been at the Christian Century, which is based in Chicago. I'm in Kansas City.
Okay.
But I've been at the Christian Century for a year and a half. Before that, I was a nun reporter for Global Sisters Report, which is a Catholic publication, part of the National Catholic Reporter. So religion reporting is my thing.
That's cool. Did you go to school for that?
I did. I got my bachelor's in journalism, and then I went to seminary and it's such a mouthful. I got a Master of Arts in Religion with a concentration in urban and intercultural studies because I knew I wanted to do religion reporting.
I love that. That's like, you never think of, I never thought about that. Although I never really knew I wanted to be a journalist. I always knew I liked making things and I
Yeah,
like tell people
yeah,
and I like talking. Uh, so it kind of just worked.
yeah.
That's really interesting. How did you decide you wanted to do that? Did you grow up in a, and this is maybe something you don't want to talk about, but I
Oh,
just find interesting.
open book. I'm an open book. No, I always wanted to be a journalist, like since I can remember what I wanted to be. But I actually thought I wanted, well, first I wanted to do political reporting, and I was like, this is stressful. Like in high school, I was like,
Yeah, it
no,
stresses
like,
me out.
yeah, like I just, no, no, that's not what I want to do with my life. So then I kind of said I wanted to be a fashion journalist. And that's what I was studying in school
Yeah,
up to my junior year of college. And I just had this another kind of epiphany. It's like I like fashion, but I don't. That's not what I want to do with my life. Like that's a hobby for me. Um, and I really became just fascinated. Well, the environment that I was in. When backtrack, I was at Ball State University, which is where I got my bachelor's, and it is a kind of bizarrely religious campus. I actually wrote a story about this while I was there. It's a small school, but the number of just faith-based groups for students like outnumbered bigger schools in
yeah.
Indiana's where Ball State is. And I just kind of became fascinated with this idea of how people see themselves in the universe, like what place they think they have in the universe and like what that means for what they do. Just that to me, I could ask questions and talk to people about that all day. So I was like, you know what,
That's
I could like be a
interesting.
religion reporter. And I found shortly after that the Religion News Association, which I'm now a part of. But as a student, I was like, oh, so there are people who do this. Like there's just religion reporters. This is a thing. And it's,
Yeah.
a little family. And so I got sucked in and never looked back.
I love that. When I kind of do like PR marketing now, and they really always talk about niching down, but I think that works for any aspect in your life because if you get hyper focused on something and you're really good at it, you're just going to blow people out of the water, which I'm
Yeah.
assuming is like how you found your job. And like, I'm guessing you're happier in that. And than you would be maybe at a general assignment
Mm-hmm. Oh, for
position.
sure. 100%. And whenever I talk to students, I've been doing in COVID, doing lots of talking to student journalists. And I really tried to emphasize like there's a need for journal assignment reporters for sure. But if you have a specialty and you can be like really good at that thing, I think you're going to be a lot more marketable.
Yeah, yes, because and they always ask you that in an interview, like, what do you love reporting about? And I always was like, I don't know. I literally don't. I mean, I like the weather and I like breaking news, but I did realize down the road, like all of my long form pieces were always like medical or health related. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if I have a passion for that, but I love those stories. So maybe just for anyone watching this, like try to see what you are passionate about and you might not even realize, but look back on your stories and see what you like best because you may think it's a feature. Because I think when we all start out, we love featuring people and it's fun, but you just never know.
Yeah.
Because I've been in news for 10 years and I feel like that just started 2 years ago for me.
Mm-hmm.
But so we'll jump into like this group is really about how to find that enterprise content. Like you were just talking about being on the Ball State campus and you really realize just out of your own observations a great story. And I think, it's hard to teach that kind of uh, skill because it
Mm-hmm.
really is a skill. You just have to it's either natural or you have to build on it for a long time and really get in that mindset. And it does take time, but I guess how do you find stories in your world of reporting? We've in the past, we talk about relationships and just noticing things. What's your process?
Whew, what is my process? Well, I think some stories are kind of obligatory.
Hmm. Like it
Um,
just has to be covered.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So at the Christian Century, we had not done a QAnon story. I was like, we got to cover this, especially since there's so much like religious tie into that with evangelical. So I wrote that story and I tried, put my little Dawn's spin on it, and really look at really focus on the religious underpinnings and like the social, like cultural, like roots of that movement. But for the stories that are like my little passion projects, I I think my process begins by honing in on something that I just am curious about, that I want to find the answer to,
Mhm.
personally. So a story that I just wrote for the Christian Century, I say I just wrote, it was just published. I wrote it almost a year ago.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh. So you really do like long form, like wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
Wow.
but I was just seeing in a lot of kind of like Black wellness spaces on the internet, there were these people who would identify as Christian,
Mhm.
but they would also identify as witches or people who are really into witchcraft. And it wasn't one or the other. They weren't like leaving Christianity to like dive into witchcraft. They were calling themselves like Christian witches or Pago Christians. I was like, what is this? And
Yeah.
so I wanted to figure out why that was happening. And so I wrote an article just kind of diving into how many young Black people who are Christians, um, obviously, I mean, they have not renounced their Christianity. They still find some truth, some meaning in that, but they also recognize that the Christianity that they've been handed was a little whitewashed
Mhm.
culturally, and trying to find their authentic spiritual roots, which is difficult for many Black Americans. They don't, we don't know where we came from. So trying to get into African tribal spirituality kind of led them to this place where they were doing like crystals and oils and saging and all of that stuff, and how they held that intention with their Christianity. And it was because I wanted to know why this was happening. Why do I keep seeing this on Instagram?
Yeah.
Uh,
General curiosity.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's, I would say, the big driving point for me. The next story I really want to work on is the green burial movement, and how that works within faith groups. So people who, don't want to be embalmed when they're buried with like chemicals, and they don't want a lacquered casket. They want to, be lowered on the ground in a pine box, because it's more eco-friendly. And how does that tie into their spirituality, their religion, and their sense of stewardship for the earth? I should really want
That's
to know more
so
about that one, because I kind of want a green burial, and I want to know, where can you do this? Last I heard it was like only in Virginia, but I think that's changed. So yeah, that's my next thing that I'm embarking on, because I want to know. I just
oh
want to
my
know.
gosh. Your job sounds like a dream job.
Doesn't it?
I definitely couldn't just write about religion because honestly, I don't even know that much about my own religion, to be quite frank. But uh, wow, to be able to work on so many, not maybe not so many, but like have your own passion projects and then to be able to
Yeah.
do that is a blessing.
Yeah, it really is. I feel incredibly lucky to have the job that I have, and the really understanding and supportive editor that I have, even at the Christian Century, as an editor, the top editor. Um, Really, really lucky.
Yeah. So how do you go about like in TV we go and we pitch our stories to producers, but we have to get that story done that day. That's why I'm like, you're like, I wrote this a year ago. And I'm like, what? Like, I did 320 stories last year. Like it's such a different world, but I'm
Yeah.
so
Oh my gosh.
fascinated. Because and that's why I say like you guys
Hmm.
because it is it's truly impressive just how detailed you have to get and have to be because I don't know, like I feel like for me I would lose my notes, like you should see my office, I would lose track, but having that deadline every day is good for me.
Yeah.
Do you get tips in this sort of role? I'm guessing maybe not because you're not, I mean, because you do cover daily stuff.
I
um
don't know. Uh,
I love it. I love
uh,
it.
yeah, no, our magazine is biweekly. So really the news section, I'm looking at what happened over the last 2 weeks that will still be relevant 2 weeks from now. Um, and so
Yeah.
I'm really looking at a lot of analysis and kind of explainer pieces, not a whole lot of hard news. We have a website, obviously, but we are still, I'm not sure, to our benefit or detriment, print first. at the Christian Century. And so sometimes a story will be big enough that my editor was like, can we get something on the website today? But usually
You're like, ah.
it comes out every 2 weeks.
So do you guys cover the whole nation, I'm guessing, since you're in
Yeah.
Kansas and then
Yeah.
in Chicago? Okay.
Mhm.
Um, I I skipped the question, but I asked you like, what's the pitch process like? Because we like you really have to have confidence in your pitch when you're pitching to managers. Is this something you have to pitch to someone, or you just decide that you get to do it?
Um, I really just kind of decide. I float it by my editor in our one-on-one meeting that also happens every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Um, and so far in a year and a half, he's never disagreed with an idea that I've had. If it's something for the news section, which I said is my baby, I just write it. He sees it when I turn it in. He's like,
Yeah.
okay, cool.
So maybe a better question for you, since you do a lot of research, or what kind of tools do you look at when having to do a lot of research?
Um, I like to use social media.
Mhm.
I'll do if there's a topic that I'm interested in, I will do just a search for that topic to see what people are talking about. I'm usually not incredibly interested in what, I guess, academics or kind of talking heads. That sounds so derogatory. I don't really mean it that way, but I find that for religion stories, like the institutional version of what a religion is and how people are actually practicing on the ground are not often the same. So
Yeah.
you've got, say the Catholic Church, you've got decrees from the Vatican that might differ widely from how people are actually practicing. I think I read somewhere like half of Catholics don't, what was it? I think they don't believe that the communion elements are the actual body of Christ, which is like standard Catholic doctrine. And you got like half of Catholics don't believe that. So what I find by just searching the terms on social media, you'll see like the tweets and like Facebook posts from people who are not academics, who are not, official practitioners of a religion, how they're talking about things. And that shapes the questions that I will ask. Normally, I guess I don't ask, it depends. I don't ask random people out of the blue on the internet for an
Yeah.
interview. I usually do end up going back to the talking heads, but my questions are shaped by, I think, what real people are talking about and what
Right.
they're grappling with. Um,
And I like that you probably get the time to verify, okay, she said this and they said this, but how does this apply to
yeah,
this?
yeah.
And then go back and do that.
And those would be the exact types of questions that I would ask somebody, because I think that's a better use of my time and their time than, I don't know, asking for definitions or something that I could Google, but
Right.
really figuring out where there's a discrepancy in like the gray areas. We talk about the gray areas, not the black and whites in an interview.
Yeah.
It's kind of my
Yeah.
goal.
So social media, you have to get like the official, like, but you like to really balance that out with like what people are saying and
Mm-hmm,
thinking.
mm-hmm.
Do you ever have to do like any sort of like number investigating or like research when it comes to, you were talking about like green burials, right?
Yeah.
So like how would you research that, or like databases? I'm all about like, what are more things we can access to find stories?
I know I want to do more like data reporting. I don't, that's a weak spot, I think, for me that I would like to
Me
really,
too. Don't feel bad.
yeah, do better with. I just finished a story where gosh, so I just finished my last story for Global Sisters Report a year and a half after I left. It was about sexual abuse perpetrated by nuns,
Oh,
instead of nuns as victims. And that was one of the first times, because usually in religion, I feel like everything is, well, I say everything's above board. It's not quite true. But in this instance, where I was coming back to congregations of nuns and being like, hey, there are these abuse allegations against the sister, and they would just like, no comment, where I had to do additional reporting. So I had to find, there was one nun who was a psychologist who was accused of abuse, and I had to like go to the state and find where her license was revoked. And that's not something I'd really ever had to do before.
yeah, there's so much red tape. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I think I tried to find groups who specialize or focus in a topic. They're usually a good place to, if they can't give you numbers, to at least point you in the right spot. That's what I'll probably do with these green. I mean, I
Yeah.
think there are small little groups of people organizing around green burials, and those are the people I'm going to reach out to, probably for my initial interviews.
Yeah, I would say that too. I think in one of the interviews I recently did, we really talked about how if you can't get someone on camera for us or on the record, uh, still, and they're still willing to talk to you because you get those chatty Cathys, but they absolutely don't want to be on the record. They can be such a good source of information. They may be able to point you in the right direction or may have like a former affiliation with something and know exactly how to look for something. So never like discount people if they don't want to talk to you necessarily on the record. So,
Absolutely.
all right. So last question, I guess, what is your favorite story so I can share it with everyone?
Ooh. Oh gosh, my
It's a
favorite.
hard question. I know. I hate that question.
Oh my gosh. You know what? I'm gonna say probably this nun abuse story that I just finished.
Okay.
It's very long. It is not easy reading, but
It's
it
worth it, I'm
took me
guessing.
2 years to report that one.
Wow.
Um, and I think I'm just proud of how it came together. I'm really proud of the survivors who were vulnerable enough to share their stories. And like I said, I did some big girl investigative reporting.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm really proud of it. It just came out today.
Yeah, send it to me. I would love to share it. Have any of your stories, I mean, you work on them so long, I'm sure you're able to uncover some great information. Does any of that ever get picked up like big newspaper or by big newspapers or publications?
See, now that is the perennial, I guess, lament of the religion reporter because so many people don't, I guess, see the point or value of religion. But as we say at the Religion News Association, religion is always in the room. Um,
Oh yeah.
oh yeah, people,
Even
I think,
it's like unavoidable in the TV news world. I will tell you there are multiple times I like purposely don't pick a soundbite or a quote because it references religion and we're just like we can't put that in there. Like it just feels like a no-no in the TV world because like well if we do this like I don't know there's just so
right,
much
right,
politics
right.
especially in TV.
Well, I mean, this is not quite the same as answering your question. This was not an instance where a story was picked up by a general publication,
Yeah.
but in 2019, I won the Great Plains Journalism Award for feature writing. So I was going up against like the newspapers in the Great Plains region. It was like 9 different states, and my religion stories won best feature story. So I feel like that's kind of the same thing where it was the work that I was
Recognized.
doing was
Yeah.
recognized by a secular audience.
Yeah, that's so great. I'm so glad that I talked to you because when you think of, and no offense, I mean no offense by this at all, but when you think of journalism and new, like I never ever thought, and this is very naive of me, of religion journalism.
Yeah, and people often don't. We are a small and tenacious little group of people who are really trying to, I guess, work doggedly at the importance of religion
Yeah.
in the media.
Yeah, and how it does pertain to a lot of, no matter your religion,
Yeah, yeah,
how it pertains to your life and probably the traditions we hold, and even small and big and everything like that. So cool. Anything else you want to say?
oh my goodness. No,
Okay.
I guess. Oh no, I will say this is one of
Okay.
my other soapbox issues, and this is if you're ever interested in pitching a religion story, which whoever's watching this, I
Yeah.
advise you to do. Um, but one of the things that I find very frustrating as just a religion journalist practitioner is um, I guess there's this I sense now that religion is synonymous with Christianity, and not only Christianity, but like white evangelical Christianity. So if you're pitching a story about religion, I invite you to stretch beyond that. Um, because I find that even within religion reporters, we kind of fall into that where we're talking about religious people and we just mean one type of religious person. And
Yeah.
that's not accurate.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, thanks, Dawn. I appreciate your
No
time.
problem, of
I'm
course.
I'm just going to